Flirties. On the show today, we're talking about ADHD and dating. What? I'm already distracted. LOL. And to have this conversation with us is Kaleigh Smith, a registered psychotherapist, and together we'll explore how ADHD and neurodivergence impact the way we date and make connections. We'll talk about what ADHD truly is and how it affects our dating lives, ranging from managing our time and attention to hyperfocus. We'll go into the emotional nuances of the ADHD person, how they experience and regulate emotions, and how ADHD shapes communication. While dating with ADHD does present its unique challenges, it also presents opportunities for growth and connection. So, if you're ready to explore how ADHD influences dating behaviors, discuss strategies for building strong and supportive connections, and hear personal stories that highlight the joys and hurdles of dating with ADHD from me, I'm ADHD, this episode is for you. Let's do this, Flirties.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, Flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, Flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, the topic on the show today is dating and ADHD. And on the show for this conversation is psychotherapist Kaleigh Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am thrilled to have this conversation as an ADHD person myself, and we got so many listener questions submitted for this episode. Lots to get to, but first things first, if you could share with the Flirties a little bit more about yourself, your work, and your practice.
Absolutely. So yes, I am a registered psychotherapist. So I'm located in Ontario, Canada. And so I am an ADHDer myself. And so my practice is really kind of specialized in working with mainly ADHD, but I would say, neurodivergent affirming care generally. And so, I really gear my practice to be neurodivergent affirming. So kind of understanding how, whether that be ADHD or any other kind of neurodivergency impacts someone's overall functioning, not seeing that as a flaw or something to be fixed, but rather just kind of, learning to help someone understand their own functioning, provide accommodations, really, specialized supports for our clients.
Yeah. So good. And I love the word you mentioned there, affirming, because yes, if you're on sort of the neurodivergent spectrum of things where it could include ADHD, autism, right? There's some things under this umbrella. Yes, yes. So much of the information out there is presented in a very neurotypical way.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We think
and I
a
would
little
say too,
a little differently sometimes.
Yeah, I would say too, I have a lot of clients that, come into my practice and they, initially kind of have the goal of wanting to make themselves more neurotypical or feeling like if they can get rid of this neurodivergency, then they would be able to, optimize their functioning. And that's really not how I work, because neurodivergency shouldn't be seen as a flaw. It's just a different neurotype, and we need to work with it and understand it, create that awareness for it.
Yeah, I love that. And how would you describe neurodivergence, as we'll really be focusing on ADHD for this episode, but want to spend a moment here how you would describe
that?
Neurodivergence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So neurodivergence is really just like a different kind of neurotype. So it's a
Okay.
divergent way of thinking.
Mm,
So it's, mainly, I would say, sort of what's going on in the prefrontal. So like the front part of your brain, your
hmm.
prefrontal cortex, and how, different parts of your functioning are impacted by that. So for the purposes of this conversation with ADHD,
Hmm.
it's really just like, the executive functioning impairments that can come along with being neurodivergent.
Yeah. And what would you say are some of the top things that maybe present themselves for the ADHD brain, just in terms of executive functioning, how we live our daily lives? I know I'll share a little bit from my perspective, but want to hear from your point of view too. Some of those things that I know some of the flirties listening will be like, "Oh, that's me."
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, like ADHD itself, I guess I can kind of get into a little bit of like the specifics around sort of the, diagnosis of it. But
Yeah.
ADHD is seen in sort of three different ways. So it's primarily either the inattentive type, the combined type, or the hyperactive impulsive type.
Hmm.
So depending on which one you are diagnosed with, it can show up differently. So if you're looking at sort of like the inattentive type, that would be, mainly like poor attention to detail,
Okay.
forgetfulness,
Okay.
you know, difficulty with like listening, losing things, disorganization.
Mm,
So, primarily, like the hyperactive impulsive type would be more like fidgeting, kind of like driven by a motor, like kind of always on the go,
mm,
um, difficulty staying still, um, talking excessively, or maybe,
yeah.
difficulty pausing in between conversations, waiting turns, things like that. And so the combined type is sort of, a mixture of both of those things.
Okay.
Um, and so it can impact you in a lot of different ways. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into some of the ways ADHD manifests in our relationships and the way we make connections and the way we date. Lots of those questions
Mm,
coming, but wanted to spend a little time here at the top just grounding us in this conversation. What is neurodivergence, and specifically ADHD? Some of the ways it correlates with the way we think. And I should ask this: what does ADHD stand for?
yeah. So ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Mm,
So some people still use the terminology ADD. However, that
yeah.
hasn't been used as a clinical term since the 80s.
Okay.
So really, like the term that should be used is ADHD, and
Okay.
so that is whether you are the inattentive, hyperactive, or combined type. ADHD is the umbrella term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Helpful, really helpful, because I was diagnosed, I mean, way, way back, like almost 20 years ago.
Okay.
Um, and I see that I have a lot of the executive dysfunction qualities as it relates
Mhm.
to, oh my gosh, organization, time
Yeah.
management,
Mhm.
communication, the way I make connections, which can result in misunderstandings sometimes and
Mhm.
miscommunications, where I could make, assumptions. And so we're going to get into some of that. Yeah, the way ADHD plays out. I want to
Yeah.
spend one more moment here talking about, you mentioned it at the top of the show, just about stigma and
Mhm.
how sometimes like you're working with clients and they're like, but maybe like, can you fix me maybe, or I don't want to feel this way, or I feel like, oh, I've gotten this diagnosis and I must be this certain way.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
speaking a little bit to the stigma piece.
Yeah, I think there's so much stigma about ADHD and what it is and how it can, impact people.
Mm,
Because ADHD isn't something that you see in just one domain of someone's life. So you're not just going to see it at school. And I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is it's about, not being able to study or not being able to get schoolwork done when
yeah.
really that's just one facet of someone's life. So you're seeing it at school, you're seeing it at home, you're seeing it in relationships. you're seeing it in how, someone's functioning just on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I would say, in my opinion, one of the kind of biggest pieces of stigma that I see is how it manifests in females versus males. Like in Canada, the average age of diagnosis of ADHD in males is age 7, and in females, it's 37.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because females primarily fall into the inattentive category. So the way that, females are socialized, we really, it can look like anxiety. I'd say that's like a really common, misdiagnosis, or it's really internalized differently. So if you're not primarily the hyperactive type, it's not kind of that stereotypical boy who's talking in class or can't sit still or is getting into fights, then you go years and years without being diagnosed.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I'm making a connection now between this conversation and I recorded an episode on autism and dating.
Oh, that was such a good episode. She is so well spoken.
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to follow up my episode after hers because she did such a good job. Loved her.
This conversation is already so amazing, but she made this distinction as well, where women for autism are also more late diagnosed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know she touched in her episode about the socialization of girls versus boys. And that can really contribute to that late diagnosis piece. And I mean, I would say too that, males are also, not necessarily the hyperactive type. Like they can fall into the inattentive or the combined. And depending on what kind of childhood they had, depending on what kind of supports they've had, they also can go a long time without being diagnosed until it starts to really impair other facets of their life enough that, people are ready to seek diagnosis and or treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I myself, I guess I would have been somewhat later diagnosed or considered a late diagnosis in my early 20s because for the longest time it presented as anxiety. And so like that is what I was really being seen and treated for. But it was the inattentiveness and it was just I didn't I'm very fidgety. I always have that. If you've like ever had to sit next to me in class, I'm the one with like the tapping foot and like I can't sit still and I'm shifting and I'm constantly moving, but I have so much hyperactivity in my mind. Like that is, oh my goodness, always going, which is why I really try and bring to the flirties a lot of more or some advice and support around feeling and being and embodiment. Because I mean, thinking's great, but
when it's all the time, nonstop, constantly going, it can really start to wear away at someone, and it can really start to be something that is difficult to manage. And I mean, I myself, like I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD formally till I was in my late 20s, and so with the late diagnosis can come a lot of kind of reworking, understanding yourself and what was really happening before diagnosis. So whether it's, you were told it was depression or you were told it was anxiety or something else, maybe in fact it was undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah. And we're going to get to later in the episode. One of my last questions for you will be about diagnosis support, where to seek resources. Maybe you already are diagnosed. You're curious about seeking a diagnosis. You're just looking for some more resources. So that will definitely be coming in a little bit. But I want to start. Okay, I think the question I want to ask now is maybe from your experience or the people you're working with, speaking somewhat generally, how ADHD affects our ability to make connections. How you see it play out in our interpersonal relationships.
Yeah. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And so it impacts, our executive functions. And those are sort of like the secretary of the brain parts. And so that could be, how we communicate with others. That can be, how we manage like our memory systems. That can be, how our sense of time or emotional control, how we organize ourselves. And so all of those things can really impact our relationships with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to, I think I want to follow up that with this question. And I got a few questions from the Flirties just about kind of emotional intensity. Like, is this a trait of the ADHD person, even the ADHD dater, where you may tend to fall quickly? You kind of go into the chase. You maybe rush things. You just, it's kind of like an all or nothing style of dating.
Yeah, I mean, you just use the perfect terminology. I think ADHDers are really all or nothing thinkers. So we're all in or we're not in at all, depending on whether it's something that is of interest to our brain. And so especially, in the early stages of dating, the hyperfocus is there. I'm assuming so. The hyperfocus of a new potential partner is there. They're interesting. It's novel. It's challenging. And so you can really be all in. And then oftentimes I hear of, relationship dysfunction later because, the non-ADHD partner is kind of looking back on the early stages of dating going, but they didn't used to struggle with this, or things didn't used to be like this. They used to have a lot of attention about me or interest in me. And now things have shifted the longer we've been in a relationship. Does that make sense?
I mean, gag me a little bit with that because I resemble that statement. It's very true for me. Talk about like the graveyard of hobbies.
Yes. The jack of all trades, the master of none.
Very me. Very much so, which has been, it's something I've had to, become really self-aware about, but then really intentionally work to change as like even starting Flirtations, starting this Flirtcast. Like, we're in it. I'm not giving this up. I'm not stopping. We're not getting to episode, I don't know, whatever, 30, 40, and then just kidding. Done. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be a real challenge. Like when your brain is really interested in something, you're like chasing the dopamine of something, and then that dopamine goes away. It can be really hard to, stay on track with certain things. And I would say that goes for relationships as well, because there can be this element of like the hyper focus, especially at the beginning.
Yes.
That changes as, expectations shift or, life changes happen. And, I would say too, that alongside that, there's also, the experience of, I don't know if you've heard the term rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD.
It's on my notes.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
Then maybe I won't jump ahead.
I'm so glad you mentioned it. We're going to get into, because I wanted to ask you about the rejection sensitivity aspect of ADHD, because a few questions came in about that. I want to spend, you mentioned, this is so good, dopamine. And so I want to talk a little bit about what's happening chemically in the brain with this kind of hyper focus, this, all or nothing thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so dopamine itself is a neurotransmitter that is responsible for like pleasure, reward, as well as like your motivation and attentional systems. And so ADHD is either a dopamine deficiency or it's an impaired dopamine transmission. So essentially, it's that your brain isn't making as much dopamine. So you're constantly kind of reward seeking, or your system is set up to be really like interest based.
Yeah.
So you're looking for those things that are exciting, interesting, and your brain is sort of shutting off to the things that are boring or mundane or really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going, please.
Yeah. And so there, if you're kind of looking at how that can impact relationships, kind of like as we just said, if you're really interested in something or someone, your attention is all in, you're hyper focused on it. And then if you're not interested, you're really not interested. So that's
Yeah.
that kind of like all or nothing. And so when you're looking at like a treatment for ADHD, a big part of in my books, treating ADHD really comes down to medication, because medication is something that can help your brain produce dopamine.
Mhm.
And so once you have that, regulation of that neurotransmitter, a lot of things in your life can become easier, and there can be, less of that constant all or nothing or reward seeking happening.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does, and I'm just gonna paint a scene in my living room, in my armchair, where it's like I've got the TV on, but I can't find anything I want to watch. I'm constantly cycling through, scrolling. I'm also on my phone, scrolling. I'm also, I've got my computer open where I was working on something. I maybe even have music playing, and it's like I just need that stimulation. Constantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm quite dopamine deficient.
Yeah. And so, and there's a difference between, earning dopamine and settling for dopamine. And a lot of our, the way our world is set up, we settle for dopamine. It's instant reward, instant gratification.
Yes.
It's TikTok, it's scrolling, it's this, everything's at our fingertips. And so then your body is constantly, I'm going here, I'm going here, I'm going here, I'm going here. And you're able to get that constant stimulation.
Even the dating apps. Swipe. Yeah. My gosh. So I want to ask now a little bit about limerence. And how, because I talk about that Delulu is a Salulu, but in moderation. So if you tend to go into limerence, kind of extreme fantasy, extreme Delulu, how, if that's a dopamine thing, a trait of the ADHD person, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. And so the way that I, kind of understand limerence, it's really this sort of like one-sided relationship. Like you're idealizing someone, they're not really they don't have the same kind of like feelings as you do. And so I would say that, from my definition of limerence, it's really not core to ADHD. I would say that limerence would be really, more core to like attachment or like attachment wounds.
Okay.
However, I think, ADHDers could absolutely fall into patterns of limerence depending on, social communication issues that could be taking place during dating or, their interest in someone based on, I guess what's being presented to them.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And that's a helpful distinction for me to really see ADHD as more of that executive function aspect of the brain, and limerence is more so a function of attachment and maybe some unhealed wounds, something happening there. So I think I've experienced both, where it's like I rush, but then also have the limerence present too. But it's helpful that these are actually, they're not one and the same.
Yeah, I don't think so. But I mean, I would say like, with ADHD, there are going to be a lot of attachment wounds or like, more of like an insecure attachment style that can, cross over, because depending on when you were diagnosed, when you were treated, when you were able to seek support, there's so many things that can happen in an ADHDer's life that's going to impact how they securely attach to others. So depending on, what they've heard about themselves throughout their lives, what other people have told them, any, social communication barriers that they've come across is really going to impact how they feel safe or attached to other people.
So good. I think, yeah, I want to have a couple questions here I think will be helpful to this part of the conversation just around making those initial connections when we're dating, looking to form relationships where they can feel maybe really overwhelming. We are kind of, all or nothing. So this, I have a question from a flirty. I'll just read it word for word. How to manage feelings of overwhelm when routines change and when dating something new. So getting into a little bit of that, because I do love a routine.
Mm-hmm.
I do. So you're dating someone new, your routines are changing, you're starting to bring someone else perhaps into your life, or at least consider them. I'm overwhelmed. What
Mm-hmm.
can I do?
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because, routine and structure, although typically an ADHD brain will fight against that,
Hmm.
at the core, it's actually how you can kind of optimize your functioning.
Yes.
And so it makes a lot of sense to me that someone would be overwhelmed by a change in their routine because that's, potentially going to impact your sleep or your, exercise or moving your body, your
Hmm.
nutrition, you
Yep.
know, when you're taking medication, when you're, engaging in mindfulness. So it can impact so many different things.
Yeah.
And so, for that, I would say being kind of honest and open with any potential partner
Hmm.
about how structure or how routine really is important for you
Yeah.
could potentially reduce that overwhelm. This is what I need, and this is why I need it.
Yeah. Yeah. That self-awareness piece, and then being able to just exact some boundaries that help
Mhm.
you maintain some level of consistency. You're able to keep up aspects of your routines. Because I very much fought routines for
Mhm.
so
Yes.
long, but they are, when I have structure to my day, it actually
Mhm.
releases so much stress and anxiety from just how I'm feeling, because then I'm able to really manage my time better. I'm able to
Mhm.
prioritize, okay, what's important, whereas versus going down the side quest rabbit hole of doing anything and everything that is not in any way helpful to what I actually need to get done in a
Mhm.
specific day. Like even setting up to record this interview. It's like I had my morning planned out, and you know what? I needed to stick to it so that I could really feel confident and prepared and present to do this.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, you know, being able to have that routine or that organization, something to kind of, keep you on track,
Yeah.
helps you with a lot of those executive functioning impairments. What's happening in the here and now, or what's going to be happening an hour from now.
Hmm.
How am I organizing my time? How am
Hmm.
I, paying attention to certain things? Have I made sure that all of my physiological needs have been addressed, to be able to get through day to day? Have I drank
Yeah.
water? Have I
Ooh.
gone to the bathroom? Have I had breakfast?
Mm.
Yeah.
I did forget
Have you
to
done
eat.
any of those things?
No.
Yeah.
We are running on coffee and a prayer. That's it.
Yeah.
That is that
That's
is what fuels my mornings, to be
yeah, that's
honest.
usually that's usually, to be honest, how most of my mornings go.
Yeah.
However, I will constantly tell clients, please do your best to make sure that that is not how your mornings are going and that
Yeah.
you have, eaten breakfast and taken care of yourself and,
Yeah.
moved your body and done all of those things.
Oh, there's always tomorrow. I did get up. I did use the restroom, right? Fed my
Okay,
cat. That's always the first thing I do. Open the windows, make my
great.
coffee, went to the gym. So I did get some
Okay.
movement in
You're
before.
doing very well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that. All right, I want to, a couple questions here. This one, submitted a few times about, like, so if you know your ADHD, you have a diagnosis, or maybe you've even self-diagnosed. We'll get into a little bit of that later, but when and how do you tell someone
Mm.
that you have ADHD?
Yeah. So I think that's really, it's really, it can be a personal thing. And
Yeah.
so it's really up to each individual person to decide how much they're ready to disclose and at what point. The way that I think about it, I think, as early as possible so
Mm-hmm.
that you can make sure that, not only is your potential partner going to embrace it and be okay with it and want to understand it, but that, I think then you're also showing that this isn't something that you are ashamed of, that this is
Yeah.
a part of you,
Yeah.
because this isn't, ADHD isn't something that just goes away. It is a big
Yeah.
part of who you are. And so being able to embrace it and advocate for yourself, I think can be really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And ADHD is one of those things I actually disclose relatively
Mhm.
early. I find it's something that people have a lot of awareness of and, some baseline understanding of, even empathy for. It can be something you're on a first date, even that the person you're on this date with has themselves. I'll usually wrap it up in a little bit of, humor or a cheeky flirt, something like that. But then like something I'm careful to do or I try and be mindful of is not allowing my ADHD to be an excuse for things, but helping
Mhm.
someone understand more about me. Like this is actually the way it affects me. And then it can
Mhm.
become more of a dialogue and conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you said that because that's actually a major distinction that I tell people all the time is that there is a difference between something being an explanation
Mm,
versus something being an excuse.
mm,
And so having ADHD, that can explain a lot of things. So
yeah,
you're not saying, this is something that I struggle with and I'm never willing to work on it.
yeah.
It's this is something I struggle with and I potentially might need support with
Mm,
or accommodations around.
hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I got a question, but I'm going to ask it in a second. I want to ask this one now. And this is, I'll pretty much read this one word for word as well. And how ADHD may lend itself to self-sabotage,
Mm,
ways the ADHD person may, self-sabotage connections, relationships,
mm,
retreat,
mhm.
maybe fear presents
Yeah.
itself. Yeah,
Okay.
speaking to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm going to set up my answer to this question with a statistic that I think is a really, really important one for people to understand. So, an ADHD child,
Mm-hmm.
on average, has received 20,000 more negative messages about themselves by the time they are 12 than a
Wow.
neurotypical child. So,
Mm,
that statistic alone, imagine what that does to someone's shame system. Like when you are constantly being told you're lazy
mm,
or why don't you just do this
yeah.
or think about all of the things like
Mm-hmm.
corrective or negative messages that maybe you've heard from other people.
Mm-hmm.
That really does do something to your shame system. And so I would say,
Mm,
like, ADHD can be an epidemic of shame. Why can't I be like other people? Why can't I do this? Why am I constantly struggling? Why?
wow.
And you're kind of questioning yourself. And so that can really potentially lead to self sabotage.
Yeah.
It's hard to trust other people, or it's hard to differentiate, whether someone is, genuine, whether you are deserving of someone that
Mm,
is a healthy partner, whether
mm,
you can trust yourself in relationships. And so that can lead people to, retreat or be, adverse to closeness with other people.
mm.
Does that answer that question?
Yeah, and prompts another question
Hmm.
because that I was really hanging on every word just there because just then that's like I think my shame system has been on fire for a very very long time and it makes sense now even though I'm lucky that I think I grew up in a household that was very supportive. I didn't receive a lot of criticism or like my parents yelling at me or punishing me, but part of why that was so is because I was very much driven by external validation. I was very much driven by this deep seated just lack of love for myself. That was rooted in shame. There's some gay stuff in there as well, some depression, certainly anxiety wrapped in there. But this ADHD was I recognize now a huge part of it, of just feeling like I was struggling for so long and feeling bad about that, but not understanding why, or really having those tools or resources in place. And so just striving to always succeed, right? To be like the good son, the good student, right? The teacher's pet, the best at everything. I was like, if I got so much as a B, I was just devastating. My world was over. I was in like every club, right? Just, yes. Talk about a praise kink. I needed it all.
Yeah, because that external validation, that does something. I mean, not only is that going to, give us a little bit of dopamine, a bit of like reward, pleasure, but also that's what, can help ward off any of those experiences of RSD. So if you do everything really well, then you kind of think that then you won't feel that shame. But then if someone does point out that you've made a mistake, or there's been, and I'm using quotations, a failure, or there's any sort of rejection that happens, you really internalize that and feel that quite deeply. Yeah.
Yes, very, very deeply. And it can linger for a little, oh my gosh, a little while. I think this is a perfect time now to go into the rejection sensitivity piece of this conversation. A little bit more. If you could share with the Flirty some more context around that. RSD.
So RSD. So this isn't, one of the criteria of being diagnosed with ADHD. However, in my opinion, it should be. But the DSM, like our diagnostic manual, in my opinion, is a little bit outdated. So I would say that RSD is really core to ADHD itself. And so that is sort of this intense emotional experience that occurs when there is a perceived failure or a rejection. And so I think that is really, derived from how much shame you can feel about yourself in comparison to other people, or in comparison to the way our world is set up, which is a very neurotypical world. So when you constantly kind of feel like you're the outsider, or there's something about your system, your brain, that's different, those experiences of RSD can be really impairing.
Yeah, it's like it's already tough to experience rejection, when you're dating, if it comes from another person, but then to like really internalize it, and it just seems to amplify the shame anymore, or write the air quotes here that something was a failure. So I'm curious now if there's a relation between this rejection sensitivity and anxiety, or if there is maybe this sort of this desire to, you want to avoid some of the shame, or kind of, spending a little bit more time here on the rejection piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I would say that, as a way to kind of ward off any experiences of RSD, I think people will often try to go into more of like perfectionistic traits. I'm going to have to be perfect at this, that, whatever the thing is, in order to not experience shame. And so I would say with anxiety, like anxiety itself can be also, a big byproduct of ADHD itself. ADHDers experience clinical anxiety around, like, give or take, anywhere between 25 to like 45%. So they go hand in hand. So if you're already experiencing anxiety about relationships, or you've got an anxious attachment, that can make dating relationships really hard. Did that answer that question?
Definitely. Definitely. And I think I want to ask now, I got a few questions about this, and that is ways to manage, we talked about the overwhelm a little bit earlier, but managing some of this, the rejection sensitivity, some of those feelings of shame. Yeah, maybe I don't know, one or two strategies, something, one of the flirties could do if maybe they're experiencing that right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, ADHD awareness is really like one of the biggest parts of it, as well
Hmm.
as self-compassion.
Mm,
Like self-compassion is a big one, and really learning like what is self-compassion? How do I practice it? How do I embrace who I am?
yeah.
And so, when you can do that, that can really help you be able to explain who you are to other people, and to, find a partner that is going to give you that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I've done and continue to do is like catch myself when I really go into that shame spiral, so to
Mhm.
speak. And, because I fairly recently ghosted. And it's like in the
Mhm.
past, that just I would have been seeking clarity. I would have been seeking closure.
Yeah.
I would have wanted to reach out, to get answers, to try again. Like here comes my perfectionist tendencies really morphing out of this rejection sensitivity. And then, oh my gosh, I'm definitely in that group that has that anxiety present too. And so to avoid that, I'm really looking externally for answers, solutions, responses, attention, something. So just the awareness, the compassion piece, knowing that I can provide that clarity and closure for myself. I was fine before. I'm going to be
Mhm.
good, right? This was not the person to explore a
Yeah.
relationship with. Better I know that now than three,
Yeah.
6 months down the road.
Yeah. And I mean, that can be something that is, it's a hard one to learn. It's a hard
Oh my
thing to
gosh.
practice as
Yeah.
well.
Yes.
Like I think you have to really get comfortable with yourself, especially when you're dating, because dating, in and of itself can be so
Mm,
difficult
mm-hmm.
outside of having ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yes.
so much of, difficulty with communication, or figuring out if someone's genuine, or,
Yep.
being ghosted, now that there's this whole like online dating world. And so, yeah, it can be a tough one. I
For
would say
sure.
too
And
that, even like, communication issues that can be difficult for ADHDers would be the initial communication style.
mhm.
Like, am I able to text? Am I able
Mhm.
to, follow up with, using a dating app? Did I forget that someone messaged me? Did I forget that we were supposed to, talk at this time? So
Mhm.
there can be a lot of initial anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're setting me up so well for the
Am I? Oh, good.
yes. That was the other big the like sort of the big topic I have on my notes is speaking to the communication piece.
Yeah.
And I'll say just quickly, yeah, for context, like I'm 38, and certainly when I was, really uh, got in my early 20s, even like late teens before a diagnosis, like uh, yeah, I would have this love compassion. It's like we figure these things out, and yeah, if you're dating with, and most of us are, with some unhealed hurt, some pain, maybe some trauma is there, it's dating's going to bring it all up. It just will. It's a mirror in many ways. So just I hope this conversation will be helpful. I think it is. And lots of other Flirtations episodes too, but this one is not done yet as we talk about communication now. So I wanted to ask you some communication strategies for the ADHDer, and what are some of the challenges as
Yeah.
well?
So I'll start with challenges.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think, I'll just kind of think of like three sort of examples, like distractibility. That's going to, yeah. So that's going to really impact communication.
Yeah.
So, and a potential partner feeling like you're not paying attention to them, or because you get distracted by something.
Hmm.
I would say even, challenges with inhibition control. So maybe
Mm,
talking over someone, or, not letting them finish what they're saying. that can lead to a partner, feeling like they're not being respected or you're not listening. Poor working memory.
Yep.
A potential partner is going, okay, but I just told you that, or didn't you hear what I just said? So, I mean, even those three different ways, like there's a lot of stuff that's going to, bubble up in communication.
Yep.
So for that, I would say really like, I really do push sort of like a 3-tiered treatment of ADHD. So one part of that is medication. It can help a lot with some of those symptoms. If people aren't open to medication or if they're not able to tolerate medication, that's completely fair because I think everybody has their own kind of idea about medication and efficacy and safety and stigma around it. But beyond that, ADHD coaching can be incredibly helpful, or ADHD adapted psychotherapy or counseling to start to understand how certain symptoms are impacting your day-to-day life or your functioning. Those things can really help with communication.
Yeah. As like I'm thinking of, if you ever watched Will and Grace or any Flirties have seen that show, I'm thinking about good old Jack McFarlane, like trying to have a conversation with a Jack. Oh my God, something shiny. Oh, look over there. Like that is so me, where I definitely get distracted. It's like it sometimes can present as if I'm not paying attention, where it's like, oh, what did you just say? But it's like it's like really hard sometimes.
Because you've got so much happening in your brain that maybe you are tuning out. Maybe you are just thinking about something else. Maybe you're, going through, oh, I can't forget this, or don't forget to say this, or this is how I'm, trying to relate to someone by sharing how this also affects me. And so there's a lot of different things that can kind of play out with how you're engaging really with anybody.
Oh my goodness, yes. And I'll share a couple strategies that I use that have really helped me, because I used to be just really over rely on texting, where I would go all in right away, really rush into it and want to text nonstop all day, every day, which led me to attach, not connect, really going into that space of limerence, of delulu, like really, really raging. And now with what I do, it's like, it's a real privilege, but my notifications are insane. Like they're insane. And so I have to like really manage that digital overwhelm. So it's like, I will always opt for or suggest or ask for a phone call, a FaceTime to spend time in person. I can't do, like, if someone is a paragraph texter, you're getting multiple messages and there are even many paragraphs.
It's overwhelming.
Completely shut down. I can't. I'm just like, I go into like this state of freeze and panic almost, like, oh my gosh. But if you want to hop on the phone and you want to chat for, 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever, would love to do that. FaceTime, all good. Let's meet in person, go on a date, grab coffee, a walk, something like that. I love dates that involve some activity. I've always been a fan and advocate for those because it gives me something to do. I'm moving. And then I can be much more present and focus on connecting with you. So,
I mean, I think that's a big one. Like, I actually really appreciate that you said that as a suggestion, because that's something that I tell a lot of people that I work with, is especially if you're having maybe more emotional conversations, or you're having to have conversations in the evenings after meds have worn off.
Yeah.
Is there a way for you to engage in these conversations while you're moving? Let's go for a walk, or let's drive, or, I'm going to have, some sort of a fidget toy so that I can move my hands, or not feel like I have to make eye contact if eye contact's hard. Like, just giving yourself those accommodations so that you can feel more present.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. And I'll really gravitate towards just some really just clear communication where I know if I'm about to, like, I'm going to be unavailable for a little bit, recording an episode, or I'm going into my shift at Trader Joe's and it's just going to be super crazy and busy. Be like, hey, like, I'm going to get back to you at this time, kind of thing. Check your message, but I really want to, like, I want to respond to you and not just like, send something back like an emoji or something. So just
Yeah.
checking in, letting someone know, got it, read it, I will get back to you. And then here's where routines can help, and just having some practices in place where if I need to set a reminder or even put something in my calendar, mark a message as unread, even if I read it, that really helps me. So then I
Yeah.
can prioritize my tasks, knowing that, yeah, this is important and I want to make sure I respond.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are great strategies. Like, I think that, you should absolutely be using some sort of external system
Yeah.
to help you manage, your working memory specifically. What do I need to do, or what's going on in the here and now? So it's a calendar, or it's reminders, it's writing things on a to-do list.
Mhm.
And I think too, even just that open communication that you're having with, anyone that you're talking to, that helps them.
Yeah.
If they're experiencing RSD, or if they've got, an anxious attachment. Okay, I know that this person is going to get back to me
Yes.
at this time, or, in this time frame. It's not me. It helps feel less personalized.
100%. It's like the triple C's. It's communication with clarity and consideration. Like that's really what it's about. And that's something that just helps me manage my own ADHD and overwhelm at times. As good Lord, these conversations go so quickly, but we got through tons of questions, really hit on. I'm glancing over my notes. My goodness. Yeah, we got to a lot, but I want to just these final moments here. Any last words for the flirties, and also want to offer them some of those resources for support and how they could perhaps work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, yes, this did go by very quickly.
Yes.
In terms of looking for support, so because I'm in Canada, a lot of the resources that I am geared towards are Canadian ones. So I would say, really depending on, what country, I'm assuming most of your listeners are in the States.
You'd be surprised. About 10% are in Canada.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a lot of
good.
Canadian
Hello,
flirties.
Canadians.
Yeah, we're
Good.
global.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, really researching where to go to in either your individual state or province. Like in Canada, I would say, CADAC or CADRA. So, like the Canadian ADHD Resource Alliance or the Center for ADHD Awareness, they're two really good resources. CHAD is American. That's the Children and Adults with ADHD. So they've got a lot of stuff on their website. Attitude also has a lot of really good stuff.
Okay.
But in Ontario specifically, I would say, first line, if you've got a family doctor, go to them first. See if they're willing to screen you for ADHD. If they know enough about ADHD, you might have to look for like a psychiatric assessment, either through a psychiatrist or a psychologist. In a lot of places, you're paying out of pocket for that, which can be a barrier for a lot of people. But if you're looking for ADHD support outside of medication, look for an ADHD coach or a therapist that works with ADHD, and you can start to integrate behavioral strategies and do those things outside of medication. So that would be kind of my first suggestion.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I went about it. here in the States way back when I first got my diagnosis is going through a GP. I just went through my family doctor that I was seeing at the time, and he was able to he didn't assess me then and there, but referred me out to I believe a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist that then was able to. She went through the diagnosis process with me. So that's in the States how I initially did it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know, like, you know, talking to GPs can be difficult sometimes, especially if they don't want to assess for ADHD or they don't know enough about it. So as much as you can kind of like, you know, get the resources, get the, you know, any of the like paperwork or, you know, self-report skills, like to bring with you to advocate for yourself, that can be really helpful.
Amazing. And come back and listen to this episode again, Dating and ADHD.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Yes.
Kaleigh Smith, thank you so much for being on the show today and a part of the Flirt community.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that's a wrap, y'all, on this episode of Flirtations, the Dating and ADHD episode. Thank you to our guest, Kaleigh Smith, for joining us on the show today, having this conversation with us, sharing so many amazing insights and such amazing information about dating and making connections with ADHD. What? I'm going to stay focused. Focus, Benjamin. Focus, Benjamin. Okay. For more, there's lots more episodes up on the show page here, wherever you may be streaming. Invite you to check out another episode now. Share it with a friend, someone you know, someone you want to share some flirt energy with. Rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. I'd greatly appreciate it. Hop on over and connect with me on Flirtstagram. That's Instagram. Flirt Talk. That's TikTok. Would love to see you on either or. And I think that's going to do it for me. From here at Flirt Headquarters, my name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach. And Gay Libra, Flirty. Happy flirting.